I got Jim's memo yesterday from procurement process review by the National Institute of Government Purchasing. And it says in the March 29th board meeting that he outlined the contract. And I do recall that, but I didn't know the cost. I don't know if anybody's looked at the cost.
$90,000?
$90,000. I've got a serious problem with that. I mean, I looked them up. They're a membership organization. They're going to make recommendations on procurement. I think we should be able to do that ourselves with a local group. I don't think 90,000 is that's an exorbitant amount of money. I mean, I don't know if we're at that stage yet. I think it at least ought to be put on hold until everything else, the dust settles on everything else. I've got concerns with this, so I don't know whether the board has any recourse here. I think obviously the administration has a right to approve this on its own, but I didn't know if the board was fully aware of the costs.
Because we need an independent group in here to make sure that we're going to industry standards. So that, to bring somebody in from out of the area, to bring somebody in that's completely independent with input from our local folks, I think is necessary. And the 90,000, is it a lot of money? Absolutely. But I think it's worth the investment in our policies and procedures and industry standards in order to make sure that we have a good end result. Karen Rushing's doing the fraud and risk report. She's not going to recommend policy. She's going to identify risks. When we get that risk assessment from Karen Rushing, this is the group that's going to support us and make us understand what the proper policy would be to identify that risk. If we can take this group and use it in the proper way to put this to bed, I'm all for it. We need to invest in this, I think, in order to make sure it happens. Was I aware of the cost? No.
I was a little shocked at the sticker price. It was a lot more than I thought. I was thinking somewhere in the 20 to 40 range. It is an investment in restoring public trust. It is completely outside the influences of the county and the state. It takes all of the information unedited, unspun, unfiltered from the folks that are mostly affected, and puts it into the hands of professionals. I read the resumes of those people that are involved. They're eminently qualified to look at our procedures and how we're administering these programs and give us, the hard feedback that we need. So.
I had no idea it was 90,000, and I would say that, let's get a pretty clear scope what that 90,000 equals and see if it's actually all necessary. But I support doing it if necessary. Commissioner Mason?
And I just wanted to add that I support it also.
Okay. Well, my concern, I agree with Commissioner Robinson that we need an independent study. My concern is that this was kind of thrust upon us. We didn't know the amount. We found out the amount after the fact, number one. Number two, are there any other organizations in the country? Why was this one chosen?
When I communicated with you following discovery of the incident, it was I who recommended as a remediary approach that was sort of third party and hands off, and I think Commissioner Robinson just sort of quickly Googled and looked at and did her own due diligence on it as well.
That's correct.
I'm just wondering if there's we didn't give anybody else any other shot. Are there any other organizations in the country? I mean, I looked them up. They have one client, they do one county in Florida. They do Fort Lauderdale. So they're not even, I'm a little concerned as to whether there are other organizations that we should have looked at and maybe at least requested proposals from them versus immediately going with this one.
Jim, are there other organizations that we could solicit proposals from?
The concept behind the use of NIGP was number one, that it was nonprofit. Number two, that it was representative of the procurement industry nationally from a government point of view. And as a result, they set the benchmarks. They defined the best practices for local government procurement. I think one of the things that drove this cost even to a little higher than I expected was the desire to make them available for a broad-ranging set of input from people, which itself does take time. And so that's, we viewed them as independent third-party, public procurement-based, the benchmark setter, the best practices definer, and that's in part why some of these why organizations like this exist.
Okay.
I don't know what else to say. I'm not supportive of it, but that's fine. We don't have a vote on it anyway. So
Coming from the dollar amount, and also it was pretty quick, but I give it a lot of thought, and I do think that we do need to act on this sooner rather than later, because it is going to take time for any organization to get together a proposal, and I just don't think that this is something that I want to let fester. I want to get it out in the open, and I want to get it behind us, and I want to move on. And frankly, this was the tipping point for me. That 90,000, it really pushed the envelope. So I'm sympathetic. I know where you're coming from. I had the very same thoughts, the very same feelings. I guess just somehow I was able to explain them in my mind that they were justifiable considering the circumstances.
And I've been sending these this information out as I get it to folks in the business community who have been affected by procurement. And so far, I've gotten nothing but positive feedback about NIGP from what I've sent out, including the memo that we received late Friday I sent out yesterday. And I received a couple phone calls in absolute support of the proposal that we received. So I wanted to get some feedback on it, and I've received nothing but positive feedback on it so far.
Well, and frankly, we really are contracting with hundreds of millions of dollars, out there, and if our practices are not as good as they should be, I think that while it's great to take the input of the folks who potentially get the contracts, I think operating under some national standards, at least finding out what they are, would be beneficial, because we all five of us take this issue very, very seriously, and I know you know that, Joe.
and I'm not